This video contains major spoilers for both the Attack on Titan anime and manga. If you're not caught up yet, get the fuck out of here. Now on with the video. Hello, my fellow subjects of Ymir. I am the aromantic shipper back again, this time living up to my namesake and actually talking about some shipping. I put out a video on Valentine's Day about Attack on Titan ships, but that was just a joke. This time I actually want to get serious and legitimately analyze some ships in Attack on Titan. A lot of people have said that romance was not supposed to be a major theme of the series, but I can't help but disagree. Of course, it's not the main focus, but multiple main characters in the series have had romance serve as the driving force for their motivations, including Mikasa, Ymir, and Falco, so it's an important factor to analyze and talk about. And not all of the ships in AOT are really the best developed or well-written. Annie X Armin was all but confirmed in the final arc, but in my opinion the ship really wasn't very well built up or developed at all, with the two barely interacting at all before Annie was completely written out of the story for 9 years. Falco X Gabby is another ship that I don't think was super well written, not for lack of screen time, but it's just a bit confusing to me as to why Falco is in love with Gabby in the first place. I mean, I get that love is not always logical, but until Falco gets infected with the spinal fluid, Gabby pretty much takes reckless action after reckless action, constantly putting Falco in danger, with him having to babysit her all the time. It's not even like with Mikasa and how she was saved by Eren or anything like that. You could say Falco admired her tenacity and drive to succeed, except Falco was opposed to her pro-war, pro-Marley mentality. However, although these ships may not be the best written, they don't really bother me that much. I could take them or leave them, honestly. However, EreMika is quite a popular ship that does bother me quite a bit, because I think it negatively impacted the story and characters, and because it was confirmed at the cost of another ship that I think made far more sense. That's why, in this video, I will be breaking down why EreHisu works and EreMika doesn't. I'll first go through how each ship was developed over the course of the series, the evidence that was present for each ship before chapter 138 of the manga, and why I think EreHisu is superior to EreMika in nearly every way. Let's just get to it, and please, try not to start a flame war in the comments. Alright, first things first, we are going to be discussing how Eren and Mikasa's relationship was portrayed. So, from very early on in the series, it was patently obvious that Mikasa had romantic feelings towards Eren. She cared about him to a ridiculous degree, and most of her sole reason for living was to live with him side by side. And we know this love was not merely platonic or familial. She blushes around him several times, including when Ian commented about Eren being her boyfriend. She clearly gets jealous when other girls start getting close to Eren, and especially in the anime it was implied that she was about to kiss Eren when they were about to be eaten by Dinah. However, while Mikasa definitely has feelings for Eren, her attraction to him is completely one-sided, and Eren never expresses romantic feelings towards her.
What happened last night?
Well, you fell asleep early, Armin started huffing glue until he passed out, and I decided to finally get some rest and ended the night by staring into your eyes.
That's gay.
In fact, Eren initially kind of treats Mikasa like shit. He acts like she's a nuisance and gets mad at her when she tries to help him or dares to suggest he gives up on his dream of killing the Titans, and he boinked her on the head once too. He also tried to kill Mikasa when he transformed to lift the boulder, and obviously Eren didn't have control over his Titan form, and he was horrified when he later realized what he'd done. But even so, Eren went straight for Mikasa, attacking her immediately, which was probably because of his feelings of annoyance and frustration towards her were carried over to the transformation. Of course, all this was only in the first half of Season 1, and things could change. EreMika did have the potential to turn into an actually well-developed ship, but that didn't happen. Eren does become maybe more chilled out when interacting with her and less angry, but never throughout the rest of Season 1 or Season 2 does Eren express anything towards Mikasa that could be construed as romantic attraction. So now I guess we have to talk about that particular scene in Season 2, finally, when Dinah is about to eat them, and Mikasa semi-confesses her feelings towards him. What I find interesting is that many EreMika shippers actually hold this scene up as one of the biggest moments for the ship. But I honestly had the exact opposite reaction to this scene. This scene was honestly what convinced me that EreMika probably wasn't going to work out. Mikasa got in close to Eren and was about to kiss him, and Eren stood up and rejected her advances, right? Eren promises to wrap her scarf around her as many times as she wants, which clearly shows his resolve to protect her and care for her, even though there was pretty much no way to get out of this situation alive. However, what the scene pretty clearly showcases is that Eren's love for Mikasa is not romantic in nature. He does not think about her in that way. And after the scene, Eren and Mikasa never talk about this. Not once. Mikasa goes back to showing clear romantic interest in Eren, and Eren never once reciprocates that interest. His relationship with Mikasa does continue to improve as he grows to care about her more and see her as a valuable companion rather than a nuisance. But again, all of his interactions with Mikasa are portrayed as completely platonic. Throughout the first 3 seasons of the show and 90 manga chapters, there's not one single instance of behavior from Eren that could construe his feelings towards Mikasa as anything other than affection towards someone he deems his friend and his family. Not one. Now, let's talk about Historia and Eren's relationship post-time skip. The first instance we see of Eren and Historia's relationship is actually in the OVA Distress. In this OVA, Historia, or Krista at the time, gets kidnapped by some robbers, and it is Eren who speaks up for her and demands that everyone go and rescue her. Now, there really isn't any indication that Eren wanted to save Krista because of any romantic feelings he had towards her. Eren would have reacted the same way if any of them had been taken, because that's just who he is. He doesn't like to just sit back and allow other people's freedom to be taken away. Him saving Krista is no different than when he went alone to save Mikasa from the kidnappers. However, there is a very interesting detail about this scene. Listen to the song that is played in the scene where Eren resolves to save her, and the very interesting choice of lyrics in it.
俺はこのままなんて嫌だ。絶対にクリスタを助ける。俺一人でも行く。待て。馬も放たれちまった。どうやって探すつもりだ。関係ねえだろ。関係なくねえ。俺も行く。俺だってあんなみっともねえまんまでいたくねえ。みんな。
The song is called Call Your Name, and it is often attributed by EreMika shippers to Eren and Mikasa's relationship. But the song didn't play when Eren went to save Mikasa from kidnappers, it played when Eren went to save Krista from kidnappers. Very interesting. Almost as if this was supposed to be foreshadowing for something. Well, anyway, after this OVA, there is pretty much never any instance again when Historia and Eren have any meaningful character interactions or really interactions period until Season 3. So, before the Uprising arc, EreHisu was understandably not a ship on many people's radar. If you weren't shipping Eren with Mikasa, it was almost certainly with Mr. Clean or the other 2 blondes, and, well, Historia already had a pretty obvious love interest in Ymir.
Hold up, Romeo! Bumping into my precious Krista while she's got toast in her mouth, so you got an excuse to put the moves on her?
What moves?
Everything's gonna be all right now, sweetie pie. What do you say we get married after the entrance ceremony?
They seem to be very good friends.
Yeah, we don't tolerate Yumi Curry denialism on this channel because these bitches were hella gay for each other. I mean, I don't think that many people would deny that Ymir had romantic feelings for Krista. I mean, she literally asked her to marry her multiple times. Reiner straight up calls out that she's a total fruit. However, a lot of people still like to claim that Ymir's love for Historia was one-sided, and Historia only loved Ymir as, you know, a good friend. And initially, it does seem like Ymir's infatuation with Historia is one-sided, but it's revealed over time that that's clearly not the case. As Krista is replaced with Historia, we see that the nice girl act that she did was a facade, and Historia is not nearly as opposite to Ymir as we have been led to believe. Historia demands that Ymir not sacrifice herself, straight up blushes at her Titan form, and lovingly holds her in her arms after the battle is over. Then later when Ymir is captured, Historia demands that she be allowed to go and try to get her back, and is incredibly concerned for her well-being, while not really caring at all that Eren was also captured. Very clearly, Historia cares about Ymir more than anyone else in a different way than anyone else. When Ymir captures her, she says she will always be her ally, and chooses to go with her even though she sided with the very people who destroyed the walls in the first place. Also, something that the anime annoyingly cut out is that after the scouts make it back to the walls, Historia has a borderline psychotic breakdown after realizing she is losing Ymir. I think Ymir might have just meant a little bit more to her than just a good friend. Also, when Historia later got Ymir's letter where she told her that her one regret was that she never got to marry her, all the tears, I can't hold them back. Historia says, "Such a dummy. You'll play it off the second you get embarrassed." Which implies that if Ymir had actually been straight with her, for lack of a better term, she would have gladly married her. Even the soundtrack ships them.
worst enemies.
So yeah, there's really no debating this. Yumi Curry is canon. However, one of the things that is strange to me is that a lot of Yumi Curry shippers really don't like the idea of EreHisu also being canon. So EreHisu's claim this song and EreMika's claim Call Your Name. EreHisu, you got nothing. Nothing. Go cry over it. As if EreHisu somehow invalidates Yumi Curry. Like, bisexual people exist. You realize that, right? Yeah, that's another thing we don't tolerate on the channel. Bi erasure. And I could understand initially being opposed to EreHisu, and I would have loved to see Ymir and Astoria get more development as an actual couple, but the fact is, that didn't happen, and Ymir died. And it is a fact that after the time skip, Historia got pregnant with someone. Are you honestly telling me you would prefer for Ymir to get cucked by Farmer Brown? That would truly be the most insulting to Yumi Curry. Historia was always going to hold Ymir in her heart, but Ymir died, and over 4 years passed. People move on and meet other people in life. It's just what happens, and in actuality, far from invalidating Yumi Curry, EreHisu enhances it, and is a complete logical continuation of Historia's character. So now we have to talk about the Uprising arc, which is where the EreHisu ship really started getting popular. Because in this arc, Eren and Historia go from being completely separated characters to having their character arcs be intimately connected with one another. After the events of Clash of the Titans arc, Eren and Historia are clearly very different people than they were before. Historia has literally embraced a different name and dropped the nice girl act, saying that the others must see her as pathetic because the real her was so empty inside. Eren, meanwhile, because of Hanne's death and his interactions with Reiner and Bertolt, has clearly changed too. This is evident by the fact that rather than Eren yelling at Historia for how she sided with literal traitors, trying to take away everything he cared about, like he almost certainly would have done before, Eren doesn't resent her for it, and instead tries to understand her perspective. He also makes her happy for the first time since Ymir left by bluntly telling her that he hated Krista, and prefers the real her more. And Historia reveals something very interesting when she tells Eren that she secretly always admired him, because he was so confident and didn't care what other people thought about him, which is also similar to what she admired about Ymir. Right now, Historia is depressed and doesn't know who she is, and Eren is the only one who is able to pull her out of that mental state. And Historia and Eren end up forming a genuinely really sweet friendship over a short period of time, some of which was unfortunately cut in the adaptation of the Uprising arc in Season 3. There seems to be a bit of a pattern of the anime cutting out Historia content from the manga. Anyway, back to what I was talking about before, it's not just that Eren is able to help Historia recover from her loss of self-esteem, but later, Historia ends up returning the favor to Eren. The Rice Chapel scene is where Eren officially reaches his lowest point in the series. Back when Hannes died, Eren was still ultimately able to regain his fighting spirit and stand against the Dyna Titan, but here, Eren simply loses the will to live and asks Historia to kill him, believing that there was no value in him ever being born, mirroring how, in the manga anyway, Historia told him that she didn't see any reason in her being born. However, in the scene, Historia rejects this and instead attempts to save him, telling him that she doesn't care about humanity. She is not going to sacrifice herself, and she is not going to sacrifice Eren, because they are worth more than humanity to her. I may be an enemy of humanity, but I'm still your ally. Which is what she told Ymir when she decided to betray humanity once before for her sake. These words would of course take on much more meaning in the future, or at least should have. This is easily one of the most emotional moments in the series, and one of the most important moments of character development for both Eren and Historia. It's not Miksa or Armin who are the ones who ultimately revive the fire within Eren, it is Historia. And after the Rice Chapel scene, Eren is consistently impressed with how strong-willed Historia is, and it is clear he has come to admire her a great deal. Historia has become one of the most important people in his life, and Eren regularly goes to see her in her spare time, acts warmly to her, has conversations with her, and compliments her, with him making Historia blush in one instance. And Eren's friends take note of how close Eren has become to Historia. Mikasa gets jealous, and John teases Eren about holding hands with her. The characters as well as the audience are acknowledging that Eren and Historia might have the potential to be more than just friends. Later on, after the scouts return from their mission in the Shiganshina district, when Eren realizes that he might be able to use the coordinate power by touching a titan of royal blood, he keeps silent about it, even though that information could be vital to the island's survival, because he is specifically concerned about Historia's safety. Very clearly by the end of Season 3, Eren and Historia have formed an incredibly close bond that only has the potential to grow even closer now that Historia knows for certain Ymir isn't coming back. None of this is to say that you can't possibly have a platonic interpretation of their relationship. Nothing about it is ever shown explicitly to be romantic. However, it is still hinted at, far more than Eren secretly having romantic feelings for Mikasa anyway. Mikasa and Eren's relationship does develop over the course of the first 3 seasons in that Eren becomes more friendly to her and appreciates the fact that she tries to look out for him rather than resenting it. But it pales in comparison to the development of Eren and Historia's relationship, where they went from barely even knowing each other to becoming close, intimate friends with a mutual respect and admiration. They helped each of them get through their darkest moments and refused to sacrifice the other for what might be seen as the greater good. For me personally, I just really liked how natural and healthy their relationship felt. They were just 2 people thrown together through circumstance who did not have any kind of romantic interest or attraction to one another beforehand, but became good friends over time as their role in the narrative became intertwined and they formed a mutual trust in one another. A trust that, eventually, Eren would refuse to share with any of his other friends. Their interactions are just so wholesome with how much it seems like they genuinely like to be around one another, as opposed to the completely one-sided crush that Mikasa has on Eren, and I could definitely see them becoming a thing in the future after watching Season 3. But after the time skip is where the EreHisu shippers completely lost their fucking minds, because yeah, none of them were buying that nonsense about Historia just getting pregnant with some random character we've never seen before. The most logical father candidate just seemed like it had to be Eren, because the series had already established that they had an extremely strong mutual bond beforehand, and there are also a bunch of other hints post-time skip that Eren is the father. For instance, after Hanji suggests that Eren doesn't care about Historia, Eren flips out at them and gets so angry that he almost transforms, which contrasts greatly with his usual calm and collected demeanor post-time skip. Also, during Eren and Falco's conversation, Eren questions Falco if he wants to become a warrior because of a girl, which is an odd line considering Eren has never really been shown to be that perceptive about romantic feelings. However, Eren might have been able to guess where Falco was coming from, because him trying to save Gabi by preventing her from inheriting the Armor Titan would parallel Eren trying to save Historia by preventing her from inheriting the Beast Titan. And oh yeah, there is that flashback where Eren tells Hizuru that Zeke can take his plan and shove it up his ass because he wasn't about to let Historia be turned into a baby maker with 13 years left to live, even though it would protect the island. And Historia is visibly moved by his resolve to protect her. This moment is part of a larger trend that we see of Eren going out of his way to care for, specifically, Historia's well-being. Eren cares about all his friends, but he is consistently shown to care about Historia's safety and her freedom in a special way that goes far beyond the care he shows towards Mikasa, who he put in danger by forcing her to come rescue him in Marley. On top of that, in the flashback, we also see Eren smiling at Historia, which he very rarely does after the time skip. So, with all that being said, what is the evidence for EreMika after the time skip? Well, in the flashback, we do see Eren blush in Mikasa's presence, but it's portrayed, especially in the manga, that he's embarrassed about how much he cares for all his friends, rather than him blushing because he has romantic feelings towards Mikasa. And in the present day, when Eren and Mikasa meet up again for the first time, Eren acts extremely cold to her, and there is no indication they started up any kind of romantic relationship. Then, the next time they meet after that, Eren tells Mikasa that she is a slave, and he hates her. Now, obviously, this was a lie. Eren does care about Mikasa, but one of the reasons why this lie was semi-believable is because Eren has kind of acted like a dick to her in the past. By contrast, I can't really recall a time when Eren actually had any negative interactions with Historia outside of playful insults before. Eren and Mikasa's interactions post-time skip do not remotely hint at Eren's love for her, and instead portray 2 people with wildly different perspectives. It is important to point out that Hajime Isayama made the conscious choice to, on the one hand, never show Eren and Historia interacting in the present day, most likely because doing so would have given away some kind of secret in their relationship to one another, while on the other hand explicitly depicting Eren's relationship with Mikasa in the present day as not at all on good terms. Pretty much the only compelling evidence of Eren having romantic feelings for Mikasa before Chapter 138 comes in the flashback in Chapter 123. Eren and Mikasa's relationship does not seem all that different throughout most of it, with Mikasa constantly doting on him and Eren being out of it because he's thinking about the rumbling. But then there is that moment when the EreMika shippers rejoiced and Eren finally asked Mikasa how she feels about him. The conversation is framed as though Eren wanted Mikasa to admit that he loved her, rather than what she did say, which is that they're just family, which is supported by Mikasa questioning if Eren might not have gone through with his rumbling plan if she had answered differently. However, while you could interpret this moment as Eren having romantic feelings for Mikasa, that is not the only explanation. Another is that Eren saw this moment play out in the memories of the future, and was trying to see if the future could somehow be changed, which would work with what Mikasa was thinking about how, if she had answered Eren differently, Eren might have tried to change the future that he saw in his memories. But on top of that, Eren also could have simply been trying to determine if Mikasa had attached herself to him because of her Ackerman blood. We know for a fact that Eren was concerned about that because it was one of the first things he asked Zeke when he met him in Marley. Eren sees his friend's obsession with him as unhealthy and does not feel the same way about her. So yes, this moment can be explained without concluding that Eren had feelings for Mikasa. On the other hand, the flashback in Chapter 130 between Eren and Historia is nearly impossible to explain without concluding that Eren is the father of Historia's child. Allow me to explain. In 130, Historia thanks Eren for standing up for her in the meeting about Zeke's plan, and says that in the end she is willing to become the Beast Titan if it's for the sake of her friends. Despite this, though, Eren says that even if she is okay with the plan, he isn't, once again hammering home the theme that Eren is not willing to endanger her even if she is willing. Eren ends up telling Historia about his plan to start the rumbling, and although she is initially opposed to him, obviously at some point she comes around and agrees to keep quiet about it. And then she asks Eren, "What would you think about me having a child?" Why did Historia say this, and what did she mean by it? Historia already knew how Eren felt about her bearing children. He was not in favor of it, if it was being pushed upon her. Well, maybe Eren would be okay with it if Historia was actually in love with the person she was having children with. There was never any indication that Historia was in love with Farmer Brown, though. He threw rocks at her as a child, and when we see them together in the present day, she has a look of boredom and coldness towards him. If Historia really did love him, why didn't we see that? Why didn't she tell Eren that? Why was the reader not given the full context of what she meant? But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Historia did love Farmer Brown and wanted to have a child with him. Why would she choose to get pregnant at that specific time period? Why would she not wait until after Eren had successfully implemented his rumbling plan and made sure the island was safe, rather than bring a child into a world that was about to be plunged into utter chaos? Well, you could say that Historia needed to get pregnant at that specific time period because it was important for Eren's plan, so that the military police would not immediately make her eat Zeke. Except, it actually was not important for Historia to get pregnant at that specific time, because Eren and Zeke could simply use the spinal fluid wine to assure Zeke wasn't fed to Historia. But, okay, maybe you can argue that Historia getting pregnant with Farmer Brown, whom she loved, at that specific time, was a backup plan in case something went wrong with the tainted wine plan. To which I can only respond, fine. Maybe that is a possible but unlikely and contrived scenario that can explain Historia's pregnancy without Eren being the father. However, the explanation for this flashback that makes the most sense and has so much more meaning behind it than the alternative is this. When Historia asked Eren, "What would you think about me having a child?" she specifically meant, "What would you think about me having a child with you?" Historia had realized why Eren was so protective of her and so opposed to her being turned into a breeding machine, because he had romantic feelings towards her, feelings that she also had towards him. And after she got on board with Eren's plan, she wanted to get pregnant with his child, and she wanted to do it as soon as possible, not just to make it so that she wouldn't be forced to eat Zeke, but because she knew Eren was on borrowed time and would be dead in a few years, so she wanted to give Eren the chance to spend as much time as he could with her and their child after he completed the rumbling, before he was taken by the curse of Ymir. And this isn't just baseless conjecture. Chapter 130 specifically makes a point to call attention to the fact that Eren is on borrowed time. The panels where Eren says he has 4 years left to live and Historia asks him about having a child are literally side by side. And also, by the way, directly after Zeke asks Eren about if he will reciprocate Mikasa's feelings towards him. That's not simple coincidence. Chapter 130 was practically screaming at its audience that Eren was the father. For crying out loud, the Attack on Titan soundtrack even hints at this. Remember the song Zero Eclipse that was a love letter to Historia and Ymir's relationship? Well, the interesting thing about that song is that the perspective seems to change as it goes along. At first, it's clear that it is supposed to be about Historia and Ymir's relationship, but then it starts to have lyrics that would probably apply to Eren and Historia's relationship better. Make a promise that I cannot regret. A promise to return to you after I carry out the rumbling. As long as I can see you in secret, while you use Farmer Brown to fool everyone into believing he's the father to protect us. I'll never learn how to let you go, even if you yourself are willing to give yourself up. But all this meaning, all this hinting, all this foreshadowing ultimately amounted to nothing in the end. I guess it was just one giant red herring all along, because chapter 139 reveals that apparently Eren was a total cuck who wanted Mikasa all along. And that the father of Historia's child really was just Farmer Brown. Except, I don't buy it. I do not believe that Isayama really thought that Eren was in love with Mikasa all along. I think that, originally, Eren and Mikasa's interaction in chapter 123 was the red herring, and Isayama was originally planning to reveal that Eren was the father until some point after chapter 130, when he changed the ending. This is not exactly a niche theory, as many Attack on Titan fans have speculated that Isayama changed his original ending in the process of writing the final arc, simply because of how out of place the ending feels and how many of the things Isayama set up did not have proper payoff in the end. Why else would Historia's interaction in chapter 130 turn out to be so utterly devoid of meaning in the end, coming from a writer who is notorious for packing great importance into the smallest details and conversations? Why did Isayama change the ending? Did he just want to pander to fans? Did he not want to write an ending that was too tragic? Was he just trolling? I don't know the answer, but what I do know is that the ending that we did get was, for me and many other people, a lousy ending to a fantastic series. When EreMika shippers try to claim that EreHisu shippers are just all butthurt that their preferred ship didn't end up panning out, they're being disingenuous. Because Eren's relationship with Historia and Mikasa was incredibly important to the characters and the story, so his romantic endgame mattered quite a bit for the quality of the conclusion. So now that we've gone over the evidence that was present for both ships, let's take a look at how EreMika affected the story and characters, and how EreHisu would have if it had actually played out. Mikasa, humanity's strongest soldier. So Mikasa is a character that the AOT fanbase has always been pretty split about. Some fans think she is an amazing character and absolutely love her, and others find her to be a bit dull. I, for one, was never really the biggest fan of Mikasa. I mean, she started off great, especially after we got to see her backstory and she had to come to grips with Eren's death. But as soon as it was revealed Eren was alive, she pretty much just went right back to obsessing over him for 3 more seasons. Mikasa just wasn't very interesting because her character was so task-oriented. She had a goal of protecting Eren, but not really that much more to her. I mean, yeah, she was a certified badass, which is more than I can say for some other main female shonen leads, but that doesn't necessarily make her a great character. However, it's important to keep in mind that Mikasa's obsession over Eren is not really portrayed as a good thing. She lets her emotions cloud her judgment whenever Eren is involved, which can lead to problems on the battlefield. However, initially this behavior is not seriously challenged because protecting Eren is pretty much just the scout's day job because he is crucial to humanity's survival. So Mikasa's identity as Eren's protector and a soldier who has dedicated her heart to humanity do not come into conflict. But, post-time skip, Mikasa's character becomes much more interesting because now that Eren has become a danger to humanity, Mikasa is forced to reckon with herself whether she will choose her love for Eren or her duty as a soldier. And in the end, she chooses her duty. She chooses to take Levi's place as humanity's strongest soldier and fights to stop Eren from destroying the world. And her being the one to deal the final blow against Eren and kill him was the absolute perfect way Isayama could have concluded her character arc. And way better handled than whatever the hell happened in Game of Thrones. Well, at least in theory. So now we have to ask, how does Eren loving her back affect Mikasa's character arc? In my opinion, it doesn't really add anything to it. Mikasa's character arc is about letting go of Eren, so the idea that Eren really was in love with her does not fit well with that theme because it makes her borderline yandere obsession over him seem more healthy than it's supposed to. Now you could say that it makes the whole situation more tragic, because even though Eren did love her back, Mikasa still chose to kill him in the end, and okay, fair, maybe I can see your point. I can also admit that there's another perspective to view this from. That being that Mikasa will always love and care for Eren while realizing he was too far gone and choosing to take the lessons that he taught her about never giving up and saving people and interpreting them in her own way and choosing to kill him and save humanity. It's also interesting to me that the series chose to reintroduce Luis as a character who, incidentally, was the first person Mikasa ever saved, aside from Eren, simply because it was the right thing to do, but she was only able to do it because of the strength that Eren had instilled in her. So maybe you could interpret Luis as the reason Mikasa actually decided to go against Eren and stop him in the first place, because she reminded her that she was a person who saved people regardless of who they were. However, I just would have really preferred it if Mikasa didn't still seem so obsessed with Eren even in the end. Where she is still holding on to Eren's ratty-ass scarf and kissing his decapitated head. I mean, why did we need to see this shit? It's as bad as Reiner sniffing Historia's letter in 139. And in regards to Luis, it isn't exactly controversial to say her character was pretty wasted and didn't amount to much in the end, and the scene where Luis is dying from a thunder spear really didn't give off the impression that Luis was what convinced Mikasa to fight against Eren. It more so seemed like she was annoyed because how dare this dying teenage lesbian take my precious scarf? Maybe you could say that Mikasa was annoyed because Luis was spouting off a bunch of fascist propaganda, but that's just not really how the scene came across. In the end, though, my biggest issue with EreMika and how it negatively impacts Mikasa's character is the alternate reality Mikasa saw in 138. Because what it showed is that if Mikasa had simply confessed her love to Eren, then he would have chosen to run away with her back to Paradis and would have never carried out the rumbling. And the problem with this is, it completely goes against what's supposed to be Mikasa's character arc. Her problem was that she loved Eren too much, and she needed to let go of her love and fight to stop him from destroying humanity, becoming the hero she was meant to be. But Chapter 138 tells us that actually, Mikasa didn't love Eren enough, and if she had confessed her feelings towards him, she could have prevented a global genocide. It does not work at all as a story decision, and partly ruins her character arc, making her decision to kill Eren less impactful, and putting the blame partly on her for Eren doing what he did. However, Mikasa is the character that actually suffers the least from EreMika in the end. So now, we gotta talk about Eren. Eren Yeager, the enemy of humanity. So, as with Mikasa, we first need to establish what Eren's character arc is in the series. When Eren starts out the series, he has the single-minded goal of killing the Titans and gaining freedom, and he has a completely black and white mentality of seeing his enemies as inhuman monsters worthy of death. And this applies not just to the Titans, but also to his human victims as well, which we saw with him dehumanizing the human traffickers he brutally murdered as a child. Another very important aspect of Eren's character is the care he shows towards his loved ones. He fights to protect his friends, the people he cares about, and is incredibly distraught when they die, or are revealed to be traitors. But over the course of the series, Eren's resolve starts to wither over time as he keeps seeing people around him die, and it is revealed that the evil enemies he had been fighting to destroy the whole time were his own comrades. By the time of the Rice Chapel scene in the Uprising arc, Eren's resolve has been completely extinguished because he believed that everything he tried to accomplish was for nothing in the end, and tells Historia to kill him because he truly sees no value in ever being born. However, Historia is able to reignite his resolve again, as well as Keith Chavez, who tells him his mother's words about how people are special simply for the fact that they were born. And it was important for Eren to temporarily reach his lowest point and give up on his dream, because now, afterwards, Eren is able to build up a resolve that is on much less shaky ground, and tempers his anger and rage into a calmer, more pragmatic form. But then we get the basement twist, where it is revealed that Eren's enemy is not the Titans or a group of Titan shifters, but instead, his enemy is humanity itself. And so, with his newfound pragmatic resolve, Eren sets out to destroy all of his enemies across the sea so he and his friends can finally be free. What's so brilliant about Eren's character development is that his goals from beginning to end don't actually change. What changes is the circumstances and his demeanor, as Eren goes from killing his enemies with anger and without remorse to instead sullen and remorseful. Isayama is basically taking the shonen main character tropes of never giving up and wanting to protect your friends and flipping them on their head by having them lead to the main character, Eren, actively committing a genocide of humanity. But then we get to chapter 139, where it is revealed that Eren was actually just Diet Lelouch the whole time and was trying to unite everyone against him so that there would be peace. And also he is a massive cuck who wants Mikasa to obsess over him for the rest of her life. Yeah, this moment, cuck Eren came right the fuck out of nowhere. While some people may have been crying at this panel and saying, "Oh, look how much Eren loved Mikasa, it's so sad that things turned out this way," I was just laughing at how ridiculous it is. And by the way, I would have been laughing if Eren had said, "No, I don't want that. I don't want Historia to live with Farmer Brown's baby. It should have been my child. I want Historia to remember me and never be happy with the man for at least a few years." It's just pathetic jealousy that it has never been showcased before is in character for him.
Just do this for me, alright? And, make eye contact with the bird. Finally. That scenery.
Like I said before, there was no solid evidence Eren was in love with Mikasa before chapter 138. There's literally never been any other time when Eren was facing death and was worried about not being able to be with Mikasa. Only this moment. If their romance had actually been developed, maybe this moment, if it was written better, would have hit harder, but as it stands, it just fell flat on his face. On top of that, one has to ask, if Eren was in love with Mikasa, why didn't he ever tell her? It was blindingly obvious that Mikasa loved him back, and Eren has never really been one for subtlety, so why, if Eren loved her so much, did he never tell her that he loved her? This is Attack on Titan, not Love is War, which, by the way, is the funniest anime I've ever seen. You should go watch it right now immediately. But seriously, you can try to come up with all the explanations you want for why it actually makes total sense for Eren to call the woman he loves, who he wants to love him and keep him in her heart for years after he is dead, a slave, who he has always hated ever since they were children, but in the end is just sloppy and inconsistent character writing. Now you might be saying that Eren couldn't confess his love for Mikasa because Eren needed Mikasa to kill him, so that she could set Ymir free and break the curse of the Titans. And yeah, disregarding the part about Eren telling her she is a slave and he hates her, that does make some amount of sense. But do you see the problem with that? The only possible explanation for Eren being in love with Mikasa but not being able to confess it is the ending that we got in 139, which was a shitty ending. Eren's motivations make no sense whatsoever. Isayama turning him from a hero who pledged to slaughter all the Titans to the villain who pledged to wipe out humanity was an absolute stroke of narrative genius and was handled perfectly, showing what the Game of Thrones Daenerys twist could have been if it was actually handled with remotely competent writing. But then chapter 139 reveals that actually Eren was only planning to wipe out 80% of humanity. Are you serious? Eren has been shouting at the audience ever since chapter 2 of the series, I will kill them all, I will kill them all, I will kill them all. And then out of nowhere it's revealed that, oh well, he didn't actually mean all, he just meant most of them. 20% can still survive. It just doesn't make any sense. We can read his inner monologue in previous chapters where he talks about destroying humanity. We saw in the season 1 finale where he gained memories of the future and said he would destroy the world. Absolutely everything has been building up Eren to destroying the world for his freedom and his loved ones. But then we find out he was just Ymir's pawn, I guess, and she was just using him to use Mikasa to free herself from the curse of the Titans, I guess. The reason why the Code Geass ending doesn't work at all is because Eren's plan to unite the entire world against him and set up the Survey Corps as the heroes who saved humanity makes no goddamn sense. Firstly, he did not have the entire world united against him. He created a fascist, xenophobic military regime back on Paradis that was in support of him. And he took the extreme fear and hatred towards Eldians and amplified it to the nth degree by slaughtering most of the world's population, leaving the 20% that survived with the utmost urgency in their resolve to annihilate the island devils that threatened the world. You think Armin could just convince everyone to stop fighting against Paradis because he claims he killed Eren Yeager? No, that's ridiculous. Eren didn't save his friends, he endangered them. Because now the remaining humans will all want to attack Paradis, which is under the control of a bunch of fascist extremists who will probably try to kill Armin and friends the second they even step foot on the island for destroying their glorious savior. And to make matters worse, the power of the Titans is gone, which means they don't have as much power to defend themselves, and the walls, which were an important defensive barrier for Eldia, are also gone. Eren's brilliant plan had more fucking holes in it than Swiss cheese, which is in complete contrast to his rumbling plan that made total sense. Just eliminate the world population so they are not able to threaten the island anymore. There didn't need to be some final twist about Eren's real plans, because his real plans were already revealed when he freed Ymir in chapter 122. And, by the way, I just want to make something clear. I'm not a Jaegerist. I don't think Eren should have succeeded in his goals of wiping out humanity. The only ending that makes sense thematically for me is for the Alliance to succeed in killing Eren, and then to deal with the consequences of humanity's survivors, hating them even more than they did before, showing how violence only breeds more violence. In fact, one of the reasons why I hate 139 is because it was way too forgiving of Eren, with the Survey Corps members being oh so moved by his real plans despite trying to kill him a chapter before, and Armin thanking him for wiping out 80% of humanity. My issue is that Eren's character was butchered and his motivations were retconned to not make any sense. So, can you see why I take such an issue with EreMika now? because the story and characters were sacrificed for the purposes of making the ship canon.
Did you do it?
Yes.
What did it cost?
Everything.
So now, why don't we discuss how EreHisu would have served as the perfect romantic endgame for Eren's character. As I said before, Eren and Astoria had already formed a very close relationship after the Uprising arc, and cared about each other a lot. This was not necessarily romantic, but there were 4 years in between the time skipped where it could have developed as such. The reason why EreMika felt so out of place was because it was so poorly built up. Perhaps Eren could have developed feelings for Mikasa in between the time skip that he did not have before, but this is never shown to us, and it's never even hinted at all in their interactions post-time skip, except for once. However, post-time skip, Historia has been kept hidden from view, and coupled with the fact that Eren's POVs are rarely revealed, this would be the perfect setup to introduce a flashback at some point, showing Eren and Historia falling in love between the time skip and having a child, which would be a reveal that wouldn't feel out of place at all, unlike the EreMika reveal. Eren having a child with Historia would also make complete sense considering his character and his ideals. Eren Yeager has such a fascinatingly contradictory philosophy. He believes everyone has a right to life and a right to be free, but will also take away a person's life and their freedom without hesitation if they threaten his own. It's in complete contrast to his half-brother Zeke's philosophy, who believed that Eldians do not have a right to live and should just accept their own extinction for the sake of the world. And what would be the perfect answer-made form that Eren could give to Zeke? Having a child that would live on after him in freedom after he steals away the freedom of the world. When Eren was toppled on the ground by Reiner during Marley's invasion of Shiganshina, Reiner asks Eren, "What are you fighting for?" And it's a good question to ask. Why is Eren fighting so hard, going to such great lengths as to try to commit genocide on the entire world? Is he fighting for his own freedom? Well, partly, but the Curse of Ymir will take his life in a few years anyway, so that freedom is limited. Is he fighting to save his friends? Well, partly, but some of his friends have already died because of his actions, and they were actively trying to stop him from carrying out the rumbling in the end. The answer that would make the most sense is that Eren was fighting for his unborn child, and Historia, an enemy of humanity just like him, the only one who was able to understand him, the only one he trusted to tell her the truth about his plan. Well, except for Flock, but fuck Flock, who cares about him? No, for real though, Flock's a great character, but he's just not relevant for this discussion. My point is that Eren falling in love with and having a child with the one woman who is on the same page as him makes total sense thematically, while on the other hand, EreMika being canonized necessarily retconned Eren's motivations to make them nonsensical. Beyond that, there are also just a lot of really cool aesthetic reasons why I like the idea of Eren falling in love with Historia. Not only is it a perfect parallel to Eren's father Grisha falling in love with a descendant of royal blood, choosing to reject the king's ideology of pacifism, but since Historia is the queen, that would mean that Eren would technically be the king, which is just incredible to think about, and also, by the way, would match perfectly with the lyrics in Opening 7. Never wanted to be the king. Seriously, the music artists really want EreHisu to happen just as much as I do. On top of that, it just so happens that the way Eren is able to unlock hidden memories is by making physical contact with Historia. It's just really funny for me to imagine them having sex and Eren suddenly regaining the memories of when his father's balls were cut off. So yeah, EreHisu makes total sense as a pairing for Eren. But the thing is, Eren wasn't even the character most negatively affected by EreMika. Historia Rice, the worst girl who ever lived. There has been a lot of discussion from people about how the ending of Attack on Titan ruined Eren's character, but I've seen much less discussion about how the ending ruined Historia's character. And that's a damn shame, because Historia was easily one of the best characters in the series. Even with Season 3 cutting out quite a bit of content from the Uprising arc in the manga, she still easily became one of my favorite characters in the series when I first watched Season 3 without having read the manga. So now, as with Eren and Mikasa, we must ask, what is Historia's character arc? When Historia is first introduced in the series, she is living a disingenuous life with a fake name. She has convinced herself that she is Krista Lenz, the girl who helps everyone, but the reality is that that's not who she really is inside. Unlike Eren, though, Historia does not have a strong goal that she is striving towards. When her mother was killed, she didn't know how to feel about it because she didn't know how she felt about her mother. She didn't really know who she was. The closest thing to an identity Historia had was her connection to Ymir, who she says makes her feel different than anyone else, and when she is with her, she isn't afraid. But then Historia loses Ymir, and she once again goes through an identity crisis. However, over time, Historia learned to take pride in herself and realized that Ymir wouldn't want her to just sulk around feeling sorry for herself, and she wanted her to live her life with pride, even if she wasn't there to live it with her. So Historia chooses to reject who her father wants her to be, and rejects the chance to claim her birthright, because it would be taking away her agency. And in one of the all-time best moments in the series, she slams her father to the ground so hard he breaks his back, and then tells Eren to stop whining and crying, because she is going to save him no matter what he says. Worst girl who ever lived, more like best girl who ever lived. Even though Ymir isn't there in the scene, it's obvious she is present in Historia's mind with her words when she makes the decision, and it is so powerful. However, in the end, I guess what Ymir really meant when she told Historia to live with pride is to marry some random farmer who used to throw rocks at you when you were a kid. Yeah, the reveal that Eren was not the father and that Historia really did just let her childhood bully impregnate her makes absolutely no sense from a writing perspective. And this is why I don't understand the Yumi Curry fans who are against EreHisu. Historia ending up with Farmer Brown is her character going through a complete regression and betraying what Ymir wanted for her. Like I said before, there is no indication that Historia actually loved Farmer Brown beforehand, and it was portrayed as though if she wasn't lying and actually did get pregnant with him, it was just for the purposes of getting pregnant and nothing more, hence why she didn't marry him. But then, in chapter 139, we find out Historia actually did eventually marry him, which means she just learned to tolerate him, I guess? And maybe you could say, well, Historia actually did love Farmer Brown all along, and that's why she chose to have a child with him, because it was what she wanted to do. But if that's the case, why did we never see that? Why should you expect me to buy into the idea that Historia really does love him, when Historia never acted happy around him beforehand, and we are never given any reasons why she loves him, and all we know about him is that he used to throw rocks at her when she was a kid? It would be different if the series had actually shown their romantic connection develop, but that didn't happen, and there's only one single character interaction between the two of them ever shown, in complete contrast to the mountains of meaningful, emotional, and caring interactions shown in the series between Eren and Historia. When the series originally introduced Niccolo, I honestly wasn't in favor of the decision. I mean, I was an avid Connie x Sasha shipper, and it felt weird to introduce a love interest for Sasha off-screen after she was already dead. But the difference is that Niccolo actually had screen time and a role in the narrative that justified his importance, and I actually ended up really liking his character in the end. None of that for Farmer Brown. There is tons of fan art for EreMika, EreHisu, Yumi Curry, but there is hardly any fan art for FarmHisu, and do you know why? Because Farmer Brown is not a character. He has no personality, he has one line, he isn't even given a name. Isayama gave zero shits about him whatsoever because his only role was to act as a misdirect for the only father candidate that actually made sense, Eren. It was repeatedly shown beforehand that Historia cared very deeply for Eren. He boosted her self-esteem, he made her smile, he cared for her, and she tells him how much it meant to her that he stood up for her in front of everyone in chapter 130. Most importantly, though, Eren was the person who was there for Historia after Ymir left her. If Ymir could somehow come back from the dead to see Eren and Historia together, she would obviously be pretty jealous, but I also think she would be proud of her and happy for her that she was able to find someone else who made her happy. I mean, after all, the only reason Ymir left Historia within the walls in the first place is because she believed Eren could protect her, that with Eren, she had a future. Everything comes full circle. You know, if it had actually happened. But there are also other reasons why her having a child with Eren just makes sense. When Historia originally became queen, the ironic thing is that once again she was playing a role that everybody wanted her to, but despite that she still became queen in her own way, for her own reasons, and on her own terms. Later on, she is told that she needs to get pregnant for the sake of the island, so it would be extremely fitting for her story and character to, once again, do what people want her to, but in her own way, for her own reasons, and on her own terms, having a child with someone she actually cares about and loves, rather than through what would probably be an arranged political marriage or with some rando as a meaningless act of rebellion. Historia falling in love with Eren would also reinforce a theme in her story, which is that she is a goddess who gives aid to devils, first choosing to ally with the person with the same name as who people believe to be the original devil, Ymir, and then choosing to ally with the devil Eren Yeager, the enemy of humanity. Returning back to Chapter 130, I've seen some people claim that Eren was gaslighting and manipulating Historia when he told her that she was the worst girl who ever lived, and that he was forcing her to bear the guilt of genocide on her hands. But I completely disagree. Eren was reminding Historia of who she had chosen to be. Ymir once told Krista that she was just a selfish bitch who was trying to commit suicide rather than someone who actually cared about other people, which also could have been seen as gaslighting and manipulation. But the point to remember is that Ymir was right. Historia was a selfish bitch who was willing to abandon the Survey Corps and side with genocidal traitors if it meant she could be with her. Historia loved Ymir, and one of the reasons why she loved her is because Ymir was willing to call her out for her bullshit, and she saw her for who she really was. And it's the same with Eren. Initially, Historia told Eren she wouldn't be able to live with pride, like Ymir wanted her to, if she was culpable for the deaths of so many innocent people. However, Eren is telling her, no, you're wrong. How is pretending to care about people you've never met before living with pride? When you called yourself the worst girl who ever lived, when you said you would prefer humanity be wiped out by the Titans rather than sacrificing us, that was living with pride. It's an absolute genius callback by Isayama that brings Historia's character arc full circle, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. Historia's motivations haven't changed since the chapel scene. She wants to protect herself and live a life that she wants, and to protect the people she cares about, and specifically the person she loves. It's just that now, she can't make any post hoc justifications for why her decision is actually for the good of humanity. And we know that in the end, Historia came around on Eren and agreed to help him with his plan. Only problem is, this flashback means absolutely nothing in the end. There is no payoff to it. There is no reveal that Historia is the father, there is no moment where she grapples with Eren's death, there is no moment where she considers whether helping Eren was what she should have done or not, there is no moment where she considers the fate of her people and her child now that Parity is defenseless. There's nothing! I've heard people tell me that, oh, Historia's character arc had already concluded, there was no need for her to have any substantive role in the final arc, but her character arc clearly was not resolved. She was shown grappling with whether or not she should support Eren in his rumbling plan in Chapter 130. And seeing as how all the military government officials all died, she was the ruler, both in name and in practice, of a country in the midst of a fascist uprising. How in any way would Historia be irrelevant? Eren and Mika's character arcs may have been handled poorly in the conclusion, but at least there was a conclusion. For Historia, there is nothing, just the knowledge that Historia is living out her days with Farmer Brown, and invited the Alliance to the island to get assassinated by the Jaegerists. You could literally replace Historia with a block of wood post-time skip, and it would make almost no difference. She's that irrelevant, and it is absolutely criminal that one of the best characters in the series became so pointless in the end. And it's all because of EreMika. Isayama had gold in his hands. He had crafted a relationship that was so well written, so well foreshadowed, so perfectly tied in with the themes of the story, so beneficial to the characters involved, and for some reason, he decided not to go through with it. And instead ended up confirming a relationship that had almost no chemistry whatsoever, and wasn't even a real relationship since both parties were virgins who never had the guts to confess to each other, and one forced the other to kill him. And let me just say that if you personally ship Eren and Mika together, that's fine. I'm not saying you can't. However, in this video, I hope I was just able to rationally lay out my points for why, disregarding personal favoritism, EreHisu was the ship that made the most sense from a writing and character perspective, and not going through with it actively harmed the series. As I said before, I sincerely do believe that Isayama was originally planning to make EreHisu canon, but at some point changed his mind, so if that's the case, does that mean that in the anime we might get to see Isayama's original ending planned, EreHisu included? Well, it might just be me huffing hopium, but I do think that it's at least possible. I mean, Chapter 130 is where many AOE theorists consider the divergence point, where afterwards Isayama started to diverge from his original plans, and it just so happens that Season 4 Part 2 just ended on, oh, would you look at that, Chapter 130. So maybe we will see an alternate ending in Part 3, or maybe I'm totally wrong and the ending in the manga won't be changed at all. Only Ymir knows. However, even if we still get EreMika in the anime too, I'll still continue shipping Eren with Historia, Because EreHisu just works, and EreMika doesn't. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. This has been the Aromantic Shipper, and as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye!